Daylene seemingly disappeared off the face of the earth.
We love Daylene so much, and we want her home.
Carlson was last seen leaving a bar, then shopping at a grocery store.
At the bar, one of the men put his arm around Daylene, and Daylene brushes him off.
We basically have a bar full of possible suspects.
He told us that he went home by himself. And then he is seen on video buying a bottle of alcohol with Daylene.
He is the last person to see her. That's all we have at this moment.
We wanted to know where Daylene was. That was at the root of it all. Where is she?
Missing person report comes in for Daylene Carlson. The original report was by her aunt that she went to this bar and did not come home.
Daylene decided that she was going to go to a local bar called Finnegan's, and she had plans to meet some friends there. Daylene's aunt and her cousin heard from her a little bit through the night. Her plan was to come home, and then Daylene never showed up. My understanding is that Daylene communicated with her family very consistently, and if Daylene said, hey, I'm gonna be home, then she would come home. So the fact that she had not communicated with those folks at all, that was extremely alarming.
Daylene Carlson was full of life and energy. She was from Sandpoint, Idaho, loved to explore, kind of a free spirit. She traveled the United States with a magazine crew from city to city, trying to get subscriptions for a variety of magazines. So she was a person that was, I think, looking for her way in the world, but definitely enjoying her life.
When Daylene Carlson moved to Stockton, she moved in with her aunt and her cousin. And she decided she liked the community so much that she wanted to stay and she wanted to go to college here. Daylene had never gone missing in the past. So the fact that she seemingly just disappeared off the face of the earth, it did seem exceptionally unusual.
If they know anything, just, it doesn't matter how little it is, that if they would please come forward, contact the police department. She's a very quiet person, but once you get to know her, she's just bubbly and she just wouldn't hurt anybody or anything. We love Daylene so much and we want her home.
Her cousin said that Daylene had recently broken up with a boyfriend, Jacob Evangelisti. I think Jacob had some feelings about that. He wanted to remain in a relationship with Daylene, and Daylene did not. Part of the same kind of social network was Jason Gilley. Daylene and Jason were just friends, and Jason's home was kind of the party place. We learned that these young men were at the bar. Jason was there and Jacob was there. And given the circumstances, that certainly caught our attention.
So we want to talk to the ex-boyfriend, Jacob, because he has a reason to want to maybe get back with her, or maybe he's upset.
Jacob was very willing to talk to us, and Jacob insisted that he knew nothing about Daylene's disappearance and that he was more concerned for her than anybody was. And he seemed to be very transparent and very honest. And the sense was that he was telling us the truth. Jason told us that he was at the bar and that he saw Daleen there and that the two did hang out and that they were being friendly. And as the night went on, he got a text or a call from his grandmother who relayed that Jason's son was sick and that Jason needed to come home. So according to Jason, he went to the car and he left by himself and went straight home to take care of his son who was ill. Jason told us that when he left, Daleen was still partying at the bar and he had no idea what her plans were from that point on because he went straight home and didn't see Daleen again. So there was one camera angle in the hall near the restrooms, and in that particular angle, you're able to see that Daleen is kind of milling about with a group of men. And at one point, you see one of the men put his arm around Daleen, and Daleen kind of brushes him off and steps away. And when that person who tried to kind of bring Daleen in for a hug turns around, we're able to see that it's Jason Gilley. So watching the video and really dissecting it in all the different angles, what we saw was at the very end of the night, Jason left at 12 minutes after 1 a.m. and walked out of view of the camera. And then Daleen left 3 minutes later, also right out of view of the camera. They left not necessarily right together, but in very close proximity in time. By way of text message, we learned that Daleen's plan was to leave the bar with Jason and then go to the store and get a bottle of Jägermeister and continue the party at Jason's house. Jason said that he was not with Daleen. So of course, the text messages caused more questions for us than we had answers to at that time. Because we had the information that they were reportedly going to go pick up a bottle of Jägermeister, we just looked at what a logical route would be from the bar to Jason's home. You know, what liquor stores were along that route. And so we visited several of those type of locations, which ultimately led us to a local grocery store that did sell alcohol at that hour. And through that visit, we were able to obtain surveillance footage of a couple of young folks buying a bottle of alcohol. And the surveillance footage was not great. But when the two went to the register, ultimately we end up identifying Jason and Daleen. We knew that Jason was not telling us the truth simply because he told us that he went home by himself. And then he is seen on video buying a bottle of alcohol with Daleen.
Okay, Jason's lying to us. Why is Jason lying to us? That's the question.
Jason was not present. He actually was out of town. So we spoke with his grandmother. And we specifically asked if she told Jason that he needed to come home because Jason's son was sick. And his grandmother looked at us in a kind of a puzzled way and said, no, I never did that. I don't know what you're talking about. During the search warrant at Jason's home, there were several key pieces of evidence that were located. First and foremost, we found women's underwear in Jason's bedroom, which were obviously out of place. And we also found a certain amount of marijuana in Jason's home, enough to build a case he possessed it for sale. It was ultra clear that Jason was not being honest, and that we now had enough, at least based on the possession of marijuana, to take him into custody on that and have a very direct conversation with him. So on August 14th, Jason was located and he was arrested and was immediately taken into custody.
Sorry about the wait, man. I don't
Like we keep,
unlike you,
like we keep saying, we got so much stuff. It's crazy.
Well, we appreciate your cooperation, by the way. I don't know if I said that. It really helps. I mean, you know, we really.
I understand it's all procedures.
Yeah, no, we appreciate. I mean, all you're doing is helping us.
So I
So
wasn't upset about my room upside down. But so,
we're not worried about weed or whatever. I'm just curious, to be honest with you. What is a little sack like that? What does it cost?
I've been getting $10 for them.
10 per.
Yeah, so I'm not really trying to make money off it. And
Just kind of smoke for free, kind of thing.
yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so now going back to Saturday.
Saturday, it was a long, boring day. So I think I did some yard work. I can't quite remember.
You went to the bar at what time?
I would say again 9 or 10ish. It's about the time I show up.
I wanted Jason to lock himself into a statement. If the statement was going to be absolutely the truth, that would be great. If he chose to continue to stick to his story and tell us more lies, we were going to let him do just that.
I do remember playing beer pong, drinking some beer. I seen her, Daleen there, and I seen her, like I said, bouncing, I told you before, she was bouncing around. About, I would say, a little bit before 1, grandma texted me, said, hey, are you busy? Can you come home and take care of your son? All right, I will.
And then where do you go?
Straight home.
The thing that we want most is a full confession. A very close second to that is a statement that's riddled with lies. And in that interview room, Jason continued to lie.
We just want her home, safe. I just want my family to, you know, have peace and my aunt get her daughter home.
Everybody has their own kind of nuances as to how they speak, how they act. And I was just kind of getting a read on who Jason is and how he would generally communicate so that we could then identify behavior changes from that. And that's really what we're looking for, is what that behavior change is.
So what do you think about all this stuff and everything that's floating around?
Honestly, I don't even know. I know it's not good. It's sad, and I really have no thoughts on it. I mean,
What do you think happened?
thinking she left with somebody, and hopefully she's just stuck somewhere, and hopefully she's alright. I don't have no idea what happened. No idea.
Have you tried, since you found out she went missing, have you helped out, like, to try to find her, to do anything?
I was gonna print out some flyers, but my printer was out of ink.
Try calling her, texting her, or anything?
I tried calling, but the phone dead.
But what,
Goes straight to voicemail.
when did you try calling her?
Oh gosh, I couldn't even remember what day that was.
Well, I mean, has it been kind of repeatedly that you've tried?
No, I tried one time. And
Oh, just
and
one.
plus everybody else, like, oh yeah, phone's off.
He was so nonchalant about, oh yeah, I don't know, maybe she's stuck somewhere. I hope she's okay. That doesn't make sense to me. For most adults, if something happened to one of their friends, they would do everything they could to try to help locate that person, particularly in the context of this case.
Is there anything else you could think of? Anything that you think that would help us out?
I'm not one to point fingers, but I mean, Jacob was just staring her down all night long, watching her every little move.
What I kind of understood, and maybe I misinterpreted, this was pretty much she broke up with him.
I don't know if it was mutual or if he broke up with her or she broke up with him. I just know she was all excited about being apart from Jacob, honestly. She was all excited.
About being apart from him?
She's like, I'm done with him. So glad it's over. I don't know what I've seen in him.
Right.
And every time I looked toward his direction, he was staring at her.
Okay.
So, I noticed that. So.
He immediately went to deflecting, bringing up reasons. Oh, she was drinking. She was talking to a lot of guys. Jacob was staring at her. You know, that's an ex-boyfriend. So when people start deflecting, they're hiding something. And our goal is to know what they're hiding and why.
You know, when you have, here's the thing.
Yeah. Same ones you guys took.
So nothing else you could think of? Anything you want to add on the timeline? Anything you want to, that you think that maybe you made a mistake when you're telling us? Okay.
I can think of.
Okay. We have a ton of resources that we use,
Right.
investigative tools that we use,
Right.
and there's some inconsistencies in her story. And we want you to clear this up for us.
Really horrible times. Okay.
That's okay. Yeah,
that's all right.
And you can't expect us. We don't expect you to know every minute of what you did.
That's not reasonable.
It's not reasonable. But that's the good thing with surveillance, video surveillance at different locations, the cameras that are on the intersections, and the such. So we don't have to account for your time, but these things take their time stamped.
What we can see is literally the wheels begin to turn in his head, right? And him beginning to recount, where might I have gone that they might have surveillance footage.
So we need you to be completely honest with us.
Because
we know a lot more of what's going on.
Right.
Okay? And this is your opportunity to be completely honest with us. And we need you to be honest. Because we know a lot of information.
What you see is him kind of shift in his chair. And that's a classic tell of somebody who's beginning to feel very uncomfortable. Jason is beginning to connect the dots that we certainly know more than we revealed to him originally. And his body language said so much more than his words did.
So Jason, let's stop goofing around. Let's stop playing games, okay? Because we know that there's a whole lot more to this story, and this is not the time for games.
We just need you to be honest.
This is a big deal.
Any investigator knows if somebody is talking, you're making progress. It might be very, very slow progress. And even if he's gonna lie, the fact that he's talking, if he's talking, we're on the right path.
You're in a good position to help yourself right now.
Okay.
So let's really consider some questions, and let's really consider the answers that you're giving before we go further down the road, Jason. Because I don't want you to waste this opportunity that you have right now, okay, to be honest with us. Because
Trying to understand everything I can. I mean, I understand. I don't know what you guys know or anything, but
Jason, we know a lot of stuff.
And-
okay, and we need you to be honest.
please don't waste this opportunity, because this is serious, okay? So don't do that to yourself. Me leaning in and putting my hand on his forearm there is a way for me to try to connect with him, because humans like that human touch. And if that need is being met in this way, then there's a higher likelihood, in my experience, that somebody's going to continue to talk. So let's start over. So on Saturday, okay, what time do you get to the bar?
got to the bar probably 10:15.
Okay.
I was there until about 1 o'clock.
Okay, and what happened at 1?
At 1 o'clock, I left
Because what?
because of my son.
Okay.
So I went home, made sure my son was all right, and that was it.
Let's talk about,
Let's talk about your grandma and the text first. Because when we were out there on Thursday night, I spoke to your grandma, and I
Right.
spoke to her in detail about that.
right.
About your son being sick and all that, and she explained what she did or didn't do,
Right.
and it doesn't it's not
quite jive.
consistent with what you're saying. So this is your opportunity to straighten it out for us.
She didn't text.
You're right, she didn't.
You're right.
I had just went home.
Okay. Why did you not tell us the truth about that?
Went to the.
What's the purpose of it?
There is no purpose.
Well, listen, people don't lie to the police for no reason, Jason.
Right.
And we asked you multiple times, and you gave the same lie over and over. And, you know,
Well,
That-
I was texting a lot. I was,
who else were you texting?
I honestly could not remember who I was texting.
His brain's going 800 million directions, and he's trying to come up with a new strategy because he knows his whole statement is, I left to see my son. Well, that's no longer true. So now they're just going to keep chipping away at him and have him keep contradicting himself, and then hopefully each time he'll reveal a little bit more of the truth.
So why did you decide to leave the bar?
Because I wanted to go home to my son.
Okay, so who did you leave the bar with?
Nobody. I left by myself.
And where did you go?
I went home.
From the bar directly to your house.
Didn't make any stops. Stop nowhere.
Wait a minute. Wait.
Excuse me, Jason.
I left the bar. Okay, hold on. I left the bar with Daleen to Food for Less. I bought a bottle of Jaeger for her, dropped her back off at the bar. And then
Now, why would you lie to us about this, Jason?
I just remembered that I went to Food for
But
Less.
that's pretty important.
Jason,
You've been very detailed on everything to us.
Jason,
and you,
this is,
No, I understand.
it's not something you forget, Jason. It was just so obviously fabricated that he just happened to remember. Oh gosh, thank you. Yeah, I forgot that. Yes, now I remember. This is not something you forget.
I understand.
So let's talk about this. This is serious.
It slipped my mind. I'm serious.
I don't think it did, Jason. As a matter of fact, I'm quite certain it didn't. Okay? There's a whole lot more to this story, and all these questions that we sat in here and asked you, we obviously knew the answer.
Right.
That was not a slip of the mind. That was a lie.
Right.
There's a big difference. It was a lie, correct?
Yeah.
Why?
Scared.
Of what?
Because I know she disappeared around the same time.
So why would you be scared about that, Jason? Jason clearly wasn't going to volunteer any more information, so it seemed obvious that we needed to pivot
on our strategy, to confront him with facts about his lies. Ultimately, we wanted to know where Daleen was. That was at the root of it all. Where is she?
Most important is we need to get Daleen back to her family. Right? So you're going to help us find her.
I don't know how I'm gonna do that.
I'm sure you do. Jason, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Why would you lie to us about having gone home by yourself?
Slipped on mine. Sorry.
Okay. What else slipped your mind up until right now? What else do you want to change about your story? This is your chance. Jason,
Use this opportunity.
let's talk about your conversation with Daleen leading up to going to Food for Less.
I had offered, I said, do you want to come back to the house, crash on the couch? She said, okay, it's going to be cool, I'll get a bottle. I had changed my mind, I bought the bottle still, and went home.
And where did you take her?
Took her back to Finn's. She was with me, and I dropped her back off at Finn's on the way back to my house.
So you dropped her back off at the bar? You're sure?
Shortly after 1. So we left a little bit before 1, maybe right at 1.
You're sure?
What did she do when you dropped her off?
She walked into the bar.
That's weird. Jason, you know what's weird about that? You know what's really weird about all that? There's a lot of people at Finn's. There's cameras everywhere. Guess what they caught at Finn's? After because we saw you guys live together.
Her come back into Finn's.
Jason.
There's no surveillance of that.
And there's surveillance everywhere. We sat and we watched hours of footage, Jason. Okay? You guys went home to your house.
No, it's not.
Jason, let's quit around, Jason. I'm about done with it. Got it? I'm about done.
Do I need a lawyer or something? I mean, you guys are sort of yelling me. I don't understand.
Jason, listen, I apologize. I'm sorry.
I mean, yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yelling at him and cussing at him was not a successful strategy, right? And so it seemed very clear I needed to apologize and I needed to back it off. And I needed to be more of that soft touch and more like, hey, it's okay. We're here. We want to help you. This is your time.
And you're a good guy, okay? So we can make this work. We can make this okay. But you gotta be honest. Starting right now. Starting right now.
She walked towards the bar around Harvey's.
For blood, for dead bodies, for... Why don't you tell us about where you and Daleen went after Food for Less, Jason? Because it wasn't to the bar, Jason.
I'm really scared because I know when people missing, they look like you guys are looking at me. It's the person that they were last with usually has done something.
Okay, then be honest and stop lying.
I'm sorry, I'm really scared. We went back to my house. We drank a little bit. Then she called as she started to walk off to go home. I wasn't going to let her walk all the way home. She'd been drinking a lot. So I got in my grandma's car. And I don't know how much she got in.
Why is it that you lied to everybody?
Because I know how people look at when you're the last person. Like everybody's pointing fingers at me because I think she left the bar with me.
Well, she did leave the bar with you, Jason.
Right, but now she's missing. I don't have anything to do with her missing.
Then Jason, why did you not tell us that from the get-go? Jason? Because here's the problem.
I'm really scared. I'm so scared.
Things happen, man.
It's
Things
okay,
happen.
okay?
Okay, you're missing.
But so let's make it better. Okay? Jason, let's make it better.
Let's make it better right now.
Okay? Let's make it better. Do the right thing, man. You're a good guy. And I know in your heart.
Let her walk.
Hey,
I'm a good guy. Let her walk away.
in your heart, I know you want to do the right thing.
I
Okay?
don't mind it.
People make mistakes, Jason. Do the right thing now for you.
What am I supposed to do now? It's been 7 days.
The more that he becomes emotional and the more that he cries, it becomes apparent to me that these are not real tears. What we see is him beginning to get really, really worried about himself and not about Daleen. He knows that he's in serious trouble.
Jason, the more you talk about it, the better you're gonna feel.
The better you're gonna
Don't
feel.
Don't you feel
You gotta
relief
feel
right
better.
now?
That's what it should be. Let her walk.
But Jason,
She made it home.
you gotta feel a little better about, being able to get this off your
You're able to
chest.
tell us now. You haven't been able to tell anybody.
Why? I'll be because I'm scared. I'm mad that I didn't get her home.
Okay,
But
hey,
get it off
hey,
your chest.
Jason, listen, because ultimately the truth is gonna come out. Ultimately, the truth will come out. Okay? And how much had you had to drink between
Between the two of us, we drink the whole bottle
of
of
Jaeger?
I should not even get right.
Did you guys have sex?
No.
Jason.
Jason,
Jason.
why would you lie about that, Jason? Jason, stop lying.
Let it out now.
It's okay, man.
Let her walk away.
Jason, that's okay, man. Okay? But you gotta stop lying. Okay? Stop lying. Is that the first time you guys had sex? Was she upset because?
Because we were both drunk. It should have never happened.
Well, that's okay. Was she upset because you guys?
I think so. I didn't want to pursue it. I didn't want to.
Why do you think she was upset?
She was probably sobering up. We had sex and we hung out for a little bit more, and then she just said she wanted to go home. And she started walking, so I got her in the corner.
Was she in the front seat or the back seat?
See? She was telling me just let her go, just don't worry about her, just let her go. I figured she
Was she yelling?
I figured she was upset about the sex. I figured,
What was she saying?
She was like, I'm horrible. I can't believe I did this. You're a piece of garbage.
To you?
Yeah.
Why was she saying that about you?
No. Like I said,
What were you saying back?
nothing. I said, I'm just going to take you home. You'll be all right. And then she got out of the car. And I didn't want to pursue the issue, so I didn't do it. That's what I mean. So I should have just made sure she went home.
Jason said that they drove all the way to Modesto, which is about 30 minutes south of us, and that Daleen got out of the car at some unknown place, and instead of alerting the authorities in that community and asking for help, he just left and went to a gas station.
You were so good to try to stop her.
That's what I mean. I don't know.
She got out of the car and you didn't go around to help her?
No, I didn't. I really don't. That's why I didn't want to tell anybody.
Okay. She didn't jump out of the car, Jason. Jason.
Yeah, she did. She didn't jump out. She stepped out of the car.
Jason, she didn't step out of the car. She didn't just walk away, Jason. And you didn't just drive off. That doesn't make any sense, Jason. Because when you lie, it's great. Jason, somebody.
No.
Jason.
Jason,
Jason. Jason.
No.
where are we gonna find the body?
Help us find her.
Help us
Jason.
bring her home.
Her family deserves it,
You
dude.
have a family, she has a family.
She deserves. I know that.
She does.
So let's
do anything to her.
come on, Jason, listen to me. You don't seem to understand the gravity of the situation, okay? When Jen
You
explains
guys are trying to make me into something that I didn't do.
I don't want you, definitely don't want you to do that.
Can I have a lawyer?
Okay?
I'm sorry, you guys are just. I feel like you're making me say something that's not true.
No, we don't want to put anything in your mouth, but, no words in your mouth.
Yep, it's over, so
Yeah. You asked for an attorney, so.
we can't talk to you at all. So here's what's gonna happen, okay? You're gonna go to jail. Okay? Jason, tonight.
Jason asking for a lawyer and our communication having to end with him was pretty devastating. As somebody who was fielding the calls from her family every single day, I wanted to know where she was.
We are looking at a no body, no cause of death investigation. There's no evidence really of his kidnap or what we believe to be murder of Daylene Carlson. We just know that she has disappeared. He is the last person to see her. He is lying about his interactions with her, but that's all we have at this moment.
Gilly was set free for lack of evidence after police arrested him soon after Carlson's disappearance. This is the only interview he's done.
Really haven't known her that long, and just to be accused of this, it really hurts.
Carlson was last seen with Gilly leaving a bar, then shopping at a grocery store. She was never seen again.
Not that person that you all see on TV. I'm a kind person. I don't push myself on anybody. Everybody that knows me knows that.
It just seemed like such a perfect opportunity to have another discussion with him about Daylene's whereabouts, but clearly I was not the right person to have that discussion with him.
Let's quit around, Jason. I'm about done with it. Got it? I'm about done.
Introducing Detective Dela Cruz to Jason was an opportunity to see how he would respond to a female investigator.
He doesn't have to talk to me. He doesn't have to be there. He wasn't under arrest here, so he could really have told me to f off.
What happens is you come across a lot of people. I do.
Right.
You know, in the course of 20 years. And there's people that you have not empathy but I kind of feel for you, if that makes any sense.
I think so, I don't know.
Jason seems like the type of suspect that just needed to be coddled and just be reassured, as opposed to hitting him hard and him shutting down.
You seem like a nice guy.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times I know that nice people get caught up in stuff.
That's what I'm afraid of.
That's what I'm afraid of for you too, to be very honest with you.
Yeah.
Because I think you've gotten caught up in stuff, and my heart feels for you. I feel bad for you.
Right.
I think something happened. You're not someone to actually hurt somebody. I think something bad happened.
So when you watch this, he acknowledges for a minute by nodding his head. You can see that when she says, something bad happened, I think you know. And he's like, yeah. And she's trying to relay to him, you can trust me.
If anybody would want to help you on this department and be on your side, you got one person.
Right.
Okay, and I don't do that often.
I understand.
There's a lot of people that I've sat across the table from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And have done some bad things. It does not make them a bad person.
Right.
By no means. Okay?
I just don't really know. Nothing else that I can think of. Like, I've been thinking every day. I don't really know.
At that point, he just kind of like didn't budge. He just reminded me of someone that wanted to go ahead and tell the truth, but it wouldn't come out of his mouth. The written timeline was something that was beneficial for the case. We wanted to do an analysis of the events in Jason's writings. So when we get it on paper, there's one portion where he starts speaking about Daleen in past tense. That's not good. That means he did something. That means she's gone.
The condition of the body was extremely poor, so we were not able to use DNA and had to use a forensic dentist who 2 days later positively identified the remains as Daleen Carlson. Daleen had been shot 5 times, and we recovered 5 spent .22 caliber casings close proximity to her body.
To have a young gal like that, that's beautiful, that has a lot going for her, to have her life cut short, it's horrible.
Prosecutors say the evidence that they were able to get once Carlson's body was discovered fits in with the timeline that they already had for the sequence of events here at Gilly's house that night. What they don't have is the murder weapon.
Through the course of this investigation, we learned who all of Jason's family was in this area. And through questioning Jason's uncle, we learned that Jason had an old .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun that he gave his uncle and told his uncle to put in a safe and keep for him.
I asked him, when did Jason give you that gun? He said, you know, Jason gave me that gun just after that girl disappeared.
We did a forensic examination of that gun in relation to the casings that were found at the scene And through that examination, the experts were able to say that that gun that was provided to us by the uncle was the murder weapon.
Our evidence for the rape charge was Jason's statement that Daleen woke up after having sex and was extremely mad at Jason. So those were the grounds I used, and I believe was the motive for the homicide. I believe that he was worried about being accused of rape, and that was more important to him than Daleen's life.
The amount of agony that we went through every day it was harder. Every day it was not easier. It was harder and harder and harder. And I hope that he goes down. God forgive me for saying it, but I hope he does.
Jason Gilley was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, which I believe was the right sentence.
Following the trial, the jurors explained that this video and this interrogation was critical in their decision making because they were able to see that his thought process and his lies were kind of the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, in his fate.
He took my daughter away. Why take somebody else's life because of selfishness?
My cousin got justice, and she can rest now. She's been along 2.5 years. She didn't deserve any of this. She had her whole life ahead of her.
One of the saddest parts of this case is the fact that Daleen's life ended so tragically and so prematurely and left so many people absolutely, completely devastated.
There are certain crimes that remain fixed in a nation's memory long after the headlines disappear. Not necessarily because they're the most violent or the most mysterious, but because they strike at something deeper, something that challenges a community's sense of safety and forces difficult questions into the public consciousness. The murder of Maria Leidenberger was one of those cases. In October 2016, the city of Freiburg, Germany, was known for many things. Nestled near the edge of the Black Forest in the country's southwest, Freiburg had long cultivated a reputation as a peaceful university town. Its streets were filled with students cycling between lectures, cafes, libraries, and apartment buildings. The rhythm of life there was shaped by academic calendars and the steady flow of young people pursuing their futures. For thousands of students, bicycles were more than a means of transportation. They were part of daily life. Paths winding through the city connected neighborhoods, campuses, and social spaces. Among those routes was the area surrounding the Dreisam River, a familiar landscape to residents and students alike. Day after day, people crossed it without concern. It was ordinary, predictable, safe, or at least it seemed that way. On a night in October 2016, a 19-year-old medical student named Maria Leidenberger attended a student gathering in central Freiburg. There was nothing unusual about the evening. For university students, nights spent with friends are often among the most forgettable moments of young adulthood, ordinary social occasions that blend into one another over time. No one present could have known that the events of that night would soon become the subject of national headlines and one of the most discussed criminal cases in modern Germany. Sometime after midnight, Maria left the gathering and began making her way home by bicycle. It was a route that countless students had taken before, a route that seemed routine, a route that should have ended with a safe arrival, but did not. When the sun rose the following morning, concern began to spread. Maria had not returned. Communication that should have been effortless had suddenly become impossible. Questions emerged. At first, they were small and uncertain. Perhaps there had been a misunderstanding. Perhaps she had stayed elsewhere. Perhaps there was a simple explanation waiting to be discovered. But as hours passed, those possibilities began to fade. Then came the discovery. Near the Dryzum River, investigators found Maria's bicycle. Not far away, they found something far worse. Her body was discovered in the riverside area, transforming what had initially been a disappearance into a homicide investigation that would soon shock the entire country. For friends and family, the news was devastating. For Freiburg, it was almost unimaginable. A city that prided itself on safety suddenly found itself confronting a crime of extraordinary brutality. Students who regularly traveled the same routes found themselves looking at familiar places differently. The ordinary landscapes of daily life had become connected to an act of violence that seemed impossible to reconcile with the image many held of their community. As information gradually emerged, the situation became even more disturbing. Investigators determined that Maria had been sexually assaulted. They also concluded that she had died after being forced beneath the water. The details were horrifying not only because of what had happened, but because of who the victim was. Maria Leidenberger was not merely another name in a police report. She was a young woman standing at the beginning of her adult life. A first-year medical student. A volunteer dedicated to helping others. Someone remembered by friends as energetic, compassionate, and engaged with the world around her. The contrast between the life she represented and the violence that ended it would become one of the defining aspects of the case. As investigators worked to identify the person responsible, public attention intensified. The case quickly expanded beyond the boundaries of Freiburg. Regional media covered every development. National newspapers followed the investigation closely. Television programs discussed the latest findings. The search for answers became a matter of public interest across Germany. People wanted to know who had committed the crime. They wanted to know how it had happened. And perhaps most importantly, they wanted to know whether the perpetrator could be found before striking again. In the early stages of the investigation, authorities faced enormous pressure. A young woman had been murdered. The crime had occurred in a public area. The victim was widely regarded as a promising student with a future devoted to medicine and service. The city demanded answers. The country demanded answers. Yet at that moment, investigators possessed only fragments of a story. A crime scene, physical evidence, the victim's final known movements, and somewhere beyond those fragments, an unknown offender. The challenge before detectives was immense. Every minute detail mattered. Every piece of evidence had to be examined. Every possible lead had to be pursued. What followed would become one of the most closely watched criminal investigations in Germany during the late 2010s. The case would eventually involve forensic analysis, surveillance review, international information sharing, and extensive examination of physical evidence. Investigators would work through thousands of details in an effort to reconstruct the final hours of Maria's life and identify the individual responsible for taking it. But before those answers emerged, there was uncertainty. And uncertainty has a unique power. It creates space for fear, for speculation, for rumors, for questions that seem impossible to answer. In Freiburg, those questions echoed through university corridors, cafes, student residences, and family homes. How could this happen here? Who would commit such a crime? Was the killer already known to police? Or was he still moving unnoticed among the public? At the center of all those questions stood a single undeniable reality. A 19-year-old woman was gone. Her future had vanished in a matter of moments. The medical studies she had only recently begun. The goals she hoped to achieve. The people she planned to help. The years she should have experienced. All of it had been taken away. In many true crime stories, public attention eventually becomes focused on the perpetrator. Their actions dominate headlines. Their biography becomes the subject of endless discussion. Their name overshadows everything else. But this story does not begin with the perpetrator. It begins with Maria. Because before she became the victim in a nationally known murder case, she was a daughter, a friend, a student, and a volunteer. She was a young woman whose life reflected values of compassion and service. Understanding who she was is essential to understanding why her loss resonated so deeply throughout Germany. The investigation would eventually uncover answers. The courts would eventually deliver a verdict. Political debates would follow. Public controversy would grow. And the case would become part of a much larger national conversation. But all of that came later. At the beginning, there was only a bicycle beside a river, a city struggling to comprehend what had happened, and a grieving family facing a loss that could never be repaired. This is the story of Maria Leidenberger, the events that unfolded in Freiburg in October 2016, and the investigation that followed, one of the most consequential criminal cases Germany would see during that decade. To understand why the murder of Maria Leidenberger resonated so profoundly throughout Germany, it is necessary to look beyond the crime itself and focus on the life that was lost. Criminal investigations often revolve around evidence, suspects, and courtroom proceedings. But at the center of every homicide case is a human being whose story existed long before the violence occurred. Maria's story was not defined by the events of October 2016. Those events merely brought public attention to a life that had already been characterized by ambition, compassion, and a commitment to helping others. Maria Leidenberger was 19 years old when she was killed. She belonged to a generation standing at the threshold of adulthood, a stage of life filled with possibilities, uncertainty, and hope. For many young people, the transition from adolescence into university life represents the beginning of independence. It is a period when dreams begin taking concrete form and future careers cease being abstract ambitions and become tangible goals. For Maria, that future centered on medicine. She had recently begun studying medicine at Albert Ludwig University of Freiburg, one of Germany's respected universities and a major institution within the city. Entering medical school is a demanding achievement, requiring years of dedication and academic effort. Students who choose that path understand that they are committing themselves to a profession built on responsibility, discipline, and service to others. Maria had only just begun that journey, but it was already clear that helping people was not merely a future career choice for her. It was a value that shaped her life in the present. Those who knew her described her as energetic and socially engaged. She was interested in music and actively involved in activities beyond the classroom. Such descriptions may seem simple on the surface, but they reveal an important aspect of her character. University life can be intensely competitive, particularly within medical programs. Yet Maria was remembered not only for her academic path, but also for her willingness to participate in the broader community around her. She was not isolated within textbooks and lecture halls. She was connected to people. That connection to others became especially visible through her volunteer work. At the time of her death, Maria was involved with Caritas, one of the largest charitable organizations in Germany. Through this work, she helped support refugees who had arrived in the country. The significance of this commitment becomes clearer when viewed within the broader context of Europe. During 2015 and 2016, the years leading up to Maria's death had been marked by one of the largest migration movements in Recent European history. Hundreds of thousands of people fleeing war, instability, and economic hardship sought refuge across the continent. Germany became one of the primary destinations for many of those individuals. The arrival of large numbers of refugees generated political debate, logistical challenges, and emotional responses across society. For some, the refugee crisis represented a humanitarian obligation. For others, it raised concerns regarding integration, security, and public resources. These discussions occurred at national and international levels, often becoming deeply polarized. Yet amid those debates were countless volunteers working directly with people who had arrived, seeking assistance. Maria was among them. The available information does not provide extensive details regarding the specific nature of her volunteer responsibilities, and it is important not to speculate beyond the documented facts. What is known is that she chose to dedicate some of her time to helping refugees through Caritas. That decision reflected a commitment to humanitarian values and demonstrated a willingness to engage with people facing difficult circumstances. In many ways, her volunteer work aligned naturally with her decision to study medicine. Both reflected a desire to contribute positively to the lives of others. Both involved empathy, service, and responsibility. Whether in a hospital environment or through charitable work, the underlying principle was similar: helping people who needed assistance. Friends remembered her as active and engaged. Family members knew her as a young woman whose future appeared full of promise. Those who interacted with her encountered someone pursuing meaningful goals while also remaining connected to the needs of others. These qualities would become central to the public's perception of Maria after her death, not because they transformed her into an idealized figure, but because they highlighted the stark contrast between the life she was building and the violence that ended it. The setting in which her story unfolded was equally important. Freiburg, located in southwestern Germany, had long been associated with education, environmental awareness, and a vibrant student culture. The city attracted young people from across the country and beyond, many of whom arrived to attend university programs. Its atmosphere differed from that of larger metropolitan centers. While every city experiences crime to some degree, Freiburg was widely perceived as a relatively safe place to live and study. Cycling was deeply embedded in daily life there. Students routinely traveled throughout the city by bicycle. Dedicated cycling routes and paths helped connect various neighborhoods, campuses, and social areas. Among these routes was the path running alongside the Dreisam River. For residents, the river was a familiar landmark. Students used the surrounding paths regularly. People walked there, exercised there, and traveled through the area as part of their daily routines. The route Maria would take on the night of her death was not unusual. It was not an isolated wilderness. It was part of the ordinary geography of student life in Freiburg. This fact is significant because it helps explain the shock that followed the crime. When violent crimes occur in locations perceived as dangerous, communities often process them differently. People may view such incidents as tragic, but somehow predictable. The murder of Maria Leidenberger did not fit that pattern. It occurred within a setting that many considered familiar and safe. The route she traveled was one that countless students used every day. Her actions on the night of the crime were entirely ordinary. She attended a social event. She left after midnight. She rode her bicycle home. Nothing about those decisions appeared remarkable. Nothing about them suggested danger. And yet danger was present. As October 2016 progressed, Maria was settling into a new phase of life. Medical school represented the beginning of a demanding journey. University environments are often filled with anticipation during those early months. New friendships form. Academic goals take shape. Students begin imagining futures that may still be years away, but suddenly feel attainable. For Maria, those possibilities were still unfolding. There's a tendency in retrospective accounts of criminal cases to view victims primarily through the lens of what happened to them. Their lives become summarized in relation to their deaths. But when Maria attended a student gathering in Central Freiburg on the evening of October 16, 2016, she was not a future homicide victim. She was simply a 19-year-old student participating in the ordinary experiences of university life. The gathering itself was unremarkable in the sense that thousands of similar events occur every year. In university cities, students meet friends, share conversations, celebrate milestones, and enjoy moments away from academic responsibilities. Such gatherings form part of the social fabric of campus life. Maria attended one of those events that evening. As the hours passed and the night grew later, students gradually began leaving and making their way home. Some traveled alone, others traveled in groups. For Maria, the journey home involved her bicycle and a route she likely knew well. At that moment, neither she nor anyone around her could have known that the coming hours would alter countless lives. Her family had no reason to fear that this night would be different from any other. Her friends had no reason to believe they were seeing her for the last time. The city around her continued functioning normally, unaware that one of the most significant criminal investigations in its recent history was about to begin. What makes cases like this particularly haunting is their ordinariness before the moment of violence. There was no public warning, no obvious sign of impending tragedy. The final evening of Maria's life began as an ordinary night among students in a university city. But sometime after midnight, that ordinary evening came to an end. Maria left the gathering and began cycling home along the route beside the Dreisam River. Ahead lay a sequence of events that investigators would later spend months reconstructing. Ahead lay a crime scene that would shock Germany. And ahead lay the final chapter of a life that had barely begun. In nearly every homicide investigation, there comes a point where certainty ends and reconstruction begins. Investigators can collect evidence, establish timelines, and analyze physical traces left behind at a crime scene. But the final moments of a victim's life are often known only through fragments. In the case of Maria Leidenberger, the events of October 2016 would eventually be examined in extraordinary detail by police. Forensic specialists, prosecutors, defense attorneys, journalists, and the public. Yet despite the volume of information gathered, the story of that night remains defined by a tragic reality. A young woman began what should have been a routine journey home and never arrived. The evening itself had started like countless others in Freiburg's student community. Maria attended a student party in the city center. Freiburg's university culture was built around exactly these kinds of social gatherings. Students spent long days attending lectures, studying for examinations, and adapting to the pressures of academic life. Social events offered opportunities to relax, reconnect with friends, and enjoy a temporary escape from responsibilities. Nothing in the available record suggests that the evening was unusual. There were no signs that it would become the final night of Maria's life. As the hours passed, the gathering gradually came to an end. People began leaving. Friends headed home. The city moved into the quieter rhythms of the early morning hours. Sometime after midnight, Maria left the event and began her journey back to her accommodation. She was traveling by bicycle. For students in Freiburg, that decision was entirely ordinary. The bicycle was one of the city's defining symbols. It represented convenience, independence, and mobility. Students relied on bicycles daily. Many routes through the city were designed with cyclists in mind. The path Maria chose that night followed a familiar route along the Dreisam River, a route used regularly by members of the university community. At that moment, her journey appeared routine. She was returning home after an evening out. Nothing more. Nothing less. Yet somewhere along that route, another individual entered the story. According to the findings later presented by prosecutors and accepted by the court, Maria encountered Hussein Kavari during her ride home. The precise details of their initial contact are not fully documented in the information available. What is known comes primarily from the conclusions reached during the criminal proceedings. Investigators and prosecutors determined that Kavari encountered Maria while she was traveling along the route near the river. What followed would become the central focus of one of Germany's most significant criminal cases of the decade. The prosecution's reconstruction of events concluded that Maria was pulled from her bicycle and attacked. The assault occurred near the river area. The violence was sudden and devastating. Within moments, what had been an ordinary ride home transformed into a fight for survival. The attack was not random in its consequences, even if it appeared sudden in its execution. Every action that followed carried escalating consequences. According to the court's findings, Maria became the victim of a serious sexual assault. The crime itself was brutal. Its impact extended far beyond the immediate physical violence. Sexual violence leaves wounds that reach beyond the visible. It attacks dignity, autonomy, and personal security. In homicide cases involving sexual assault, investigators often confront not only the task of identifying a killer, but also the challenge of understanding a sequence of actions driven by domination and violence. For Maria, there would be no opportunity to describe what happened. No testimony. No account of her final moments. Instead, investigators would later rely upon forensic evidence, crime scene analysis, and physical traces to reconstruct the sequence of events. According to prosecutors, after the assault, the violence continued. The evidence presented in court led investigators to conclude that Maria was forced into the water. There, she was drowned. The prosecution argued that the killing was committed in order to conceal the preceding crime. That conclusion would later become one of the most significant elements of the murder charge. The distinction mattered because it spoke not only to the fact of Maria's death, but to the motive behind it. According to the court's eventual findings, the killing was not viewed as a separate event disconnected from the assault. Rather, it formed part of a deliberate effort to eliminate evidence and prevent identification. In legal terms, that conclusion would carry enormous weight. In human terms, it made the crime even more devastating. A young woman who had spent her life preparing to help others had been attacked during an ordinary journey home and killed in the process. After the assault and murder, the perpetrator left the scene. The area beside the river gradually returned to silence. The city slept. Students continued returning home from their own evenings out. People passed through Freiburg unaware that a homicide had just occurred. For several hours, the crime remained undiscovered. The darkness concealed what had happened. The river continued flowing. The bicycle remained near the scene, and Maria remained where she had been left. There is something particularly haunting about the period immediately following a violent crime. Investigators often speak about the gap between the event itself and its discovery. During those hours, the normal world continues operating. Lights switch on in homes. Cars pass through intersections. People wake up, eat breakfast, and begin new days. Yet somewhere nearby exists a reality that has not yet been revealed. That was the situation in Freiburg. The city did not yet know. Maria's family did not yet know. Her friends did not yet know. The knowledge of what had happened existed only in the evidence left behind at the scene and in the mind of the person responsible. Morning eventually arrived. With daylight came discovery. Maria's bicycle was found near the Dreisam River. The finding immediately raised concerns. A bicycle abandoned near a riverside route was unusual enough to attract attention. But what followed transformed concern into horror. Maria's body was discovered in the Riverside area. At that moment, uncertainty began giving way to grim reality. The discovery marked the beginning of a murder investigation. For investigators, the scene immediately became a source of crucial information. Every object, every trace, every physical detail had the potential to answer questions. How had the crime occurred? When had happened? Who was responsible? But for those who knew Maria personally, the scene represented something entirely different. It represented loss. A future suddenly erased. A daughter who would never return home. A friend who would never answer another message. A student who would never complete her studies. The emotional impact spread quickly through Freiburg. News of the discovery moved through university networks and local communities. Students who used the same paths along the river struggled to comprehend what had happened. The route that had once symbolized normal student life now became associated with tragedy. As information emerged regarding the nature of the crime, the shock deepened. Investigators determined that Maria had been sexually assaulted. They also concluded that she had died as a result of being submerged in water. The combination of those findings transformed the case from a tragic homicide into one of exceptional severity. Public attention intensified almost immediately. People wanted answers. Who had done this? Why had it happened? Could the perpetrator be identified? Was there a danger to others? These questions would dominate public discussion in the days and weeks that followed. Yet at that stage, investigators possessed only the first pieces of a much larger puzzle. They had a crime scene. They had forensic evidence waiting to be analyzed. They had a timeline that needed reconstruction. And somewhere beyond those facts was an offender who had vanished into the population. The search for that individual would soon become one of the largest criminal investigations Freiburg had seen in years. Police would collect evidence. Forensic specialists would process DNA samples. Investigators would examine surveillance footage. Witnesses would be interviewed. Digital data would be analyzed. What began with a bicycle beside a river would evolve into a complex investigation stretching far beyond Freiburg itself. But before any arrest could be made, before any courtroom proceedings could begin, detectives first faced a daunting challenge. They needed to transform a brutal crime scene into a provable case. And hidden within the evidence left behind on that October night was the clue that would eventually identify the man responsible for Maria Leidenberger's murder. When a homicide investigation begins, detectives are often confronted with a paradox. The crime itself may have lasted only minutes, but uncovering the truth can require weeks, months, or even years of painstaking work. Evidence does not speak on its own. Witnesses do not always see what matters. Physical traces can be overlooked. Timelines can remain incomplete. Investigators must take scattered fragments and transform them into a coherent narrative that can withstand scrutiny not only from police supervisors and prosecutors, but eventually from defense attorneys, judges, and the public. In the case of Maria Leidenberger, that process began almost immediately after her body was discovered near the Dreisam River. From a moment authorities confirmed that they were dealing with a violent crime, the investigation expanded rapidly. The murder of a 19-year-old medical student in a university city generated enormous public attention. The brutality of the crime intensified the pressure. Investigators knew that every decision they made would be examined closely. The victim was young. The circumstances were shocking. And somewhere beyond the crime scene was an offender who had not yet been identified. Police in Baden-Württemberg launched a major investigation. The scale of the inquiry reflected both the seriousness of the crime and the public concern surrounding it. Detectives, forensic specialists, and analysts began working through the evidence methodically. Their goal was simple in theory, but difficult in practice. Identify the person responsible for Maria's murder and gather sufficient evidence to prove that responsibility beyond doubt. The first stage centered on the crime scene itself. Every homicide investigation begins with the physical environment where the crime occurred. Crime scenes are often described as silent witnesses. They contain no spoken testimony, yet they preserve information. Objects remain where they were left. Physical traces survive. Biological material may reveal interactions between victim and offender. Investigators therefore approached the Riverside area with extraordinary care. Evidence collection became a priority. Among the most important discoveries were biological samples recovered from the scene. These samples would later play a decisive role in the investigation. At the time, however, detectives could not know exactly where they would lead. The evidence had to be collected, preserved, and analyzed according to strict forensic procedures. Every sample represented a possibility. Any one of them might eventually identify the offender. While forensic specialists processed physical evidence, investigators pursued other avenues simultaneously. Modern criminal investigations rarely rely upon a single source of information. Instead, detectives attempt to build overlapping layers of evidence. If physical traces point in one direction, investigators seek independent confirmation through witnesses, digital information, surveillance footage, or other sources. The stronger the overlap, the stronger the case becomes. One of the earliest priorities was reconstructing Maria's final movements. Investigators needed to understand where she had been when she had left the student gathering and how she had traveled toward the area where the crime occurred. Establishing a timeline is often one of the most important tasks in a homicide investigation because timelines create opportunities to identify witnesses, locate surveillance footage, and narrow potential suspect pools. Detectives, therefore, began gathering information about Maria's activities before the attack. Witnesses were interviewed. Information regarding her movements was collected and compared. Investigators sought to identify the sequence of events that had led her from the student party to the Riverside path where her life ended. At the same time, attention turned toward technology. Surveillance cameras had become an increasingly valuable investigative tool throughout Europe. Although cameras do not capture every moment, they often provide pieces of information that help investigators reconstruct movements across time and space. Police therefore examined surveillance footage from areas connected to Maria's route. The process was labor-intensive. Every recording had to be reviewed carefully. Hours of footage often yield only seconds of relevant information. Yet investigators understood that even a brief image could prove critical. Surveillance analysis became one component of a broader effort to determine who had been present in the area and whether any suspicious movements could be identified. Alongside the surveillance review came the examination of digital and technical data. Modern investigations frequently involve electronic information that helps establish timelines and corroborate other evidence. In Maria's case, investigators analyzed available technical data as part of their effort to reconstruct events. Each new piece of information was compared against existing evidence. Gradually, a clearer picture began to emerge. But the most significant development came from forensic science. The biological evidence collected at the crime scene underwent DNA analysis. For decades, DNA has transformed criminal investigations by allowing investigators to identify individuals through genetic material left behind during the commission of crimes. Unlike eyewitness testimony, DNA does not forget details, become confused, or alter its account over time. It remains a physical record of contact. In cases involving unknown offenders, DNA can serve as the bridge between an unsolved crime and a named suspect. Investigators therefore placed enormous importance on the results of forensic testing. The analysis revealed a genetic profile that could potentially identify the offender. Yet possessing a DNA profile is only part of the process. The profile must then be compared against available databases and records. If no match exists, the investigation may stall. If a match is found, an entirely new phase begins. In the Maria Leidenberger investigation, that comparison produced a breakthrough. Authorities compared the recovered DNA against European criminal databases. Eventually, the search pointed investigators toward a suspect. The genetic evidence led to Hussein Kavari, an Afghan man living in Germany. For detectives who had spent weeks assembling fragments of information, this development represented a critical turning point. The case was no longer focused solely on an unknown offender. Investigators now had a specific individual whose connection to the evidence required examination. The identification of Kavari immediately generated new investigative questions. Detectives began examining his background, movements, and history. As information emerged, investigators learned that he had arrived in Germany during the major migration wave of 2015. Additional information also became publicly known during the investigation and subsequent proceedings. Kavari had previously been convicted in Greece in connection with a robbery and the assault of a young woman. That information would later attract significant public attention, particularly as media coverage intensified. However, investigators remained focused on the central issue before them, determining whether the evidence connected Kavari to Maria's murder. The DNA evidence was a crucial element, but investigators sought corroboration through other forms of proof. Modern homicide cases are strongest when multiple categories of evidence support the same conclusion. Physical evidence, digital information, timelines, and investigative findings were therefore examined together as detectives continued building the case. Another issue emerged that would become the subject of public discussion: Kavari's age. Questions arose regarding whether he was a juvenile or an adult. The distinction carried legal significance because age can affect criminal proceedings and sentencing. The issue therefore became part of the broader judicial process. Authorities examined the matter carefully. Ultimately, the court concluded that Kavari was an adult at the time of the offense. That determination would later influence how the case proceeded through the legal system. By this stage, investigators had progressed far beyond the uncertainty that characterized the early days of the inquiry. The evidence collected from the crime scene had led to a suspect. Forensic analysis had established a powerful connection. Additional investigative work continued reinforcing the developing case. What had once been a mystery involving an unidentified offender was gradually becoming a prosecutable criminal case. The investigation had not been solved through a dramatic confession or a single eyewitness revelation. Instead, it had advanced through persistence, forensic science, and methodical police work. Each step built upon the previous one. Each finding narrowed the possibilities. Each piece of evidence reduced uncertainty. Eventually, authorities moved forward with formal action. Hussein Kavari was arrested and became the primary suspect in the murder of Maria Leidenberger. The arrest marked the end of one phase of the case and the beginning of another. Detectives had identified the individual they believed responsible. Prosecutors would now face the task of presenting that evidence in court. Yet even as the investigation moved toward prosecution, public attention continued growing. The victim's identity, the brutality of the crime, the suspect's background, and the broader social issues connected to the case combined to create national interest. Germany watched closely as developments unfolded. News organizations reported every major update. Political debates intensified. Questions about migration policy, criminal records, and information sharing between European countries increasingly entered public discussion. But those debates, however significant, remained separate from the central legal question that still awaited resolution. The purpose of the courtroom would not be to resolve political disagreements. It would be to determine criminal responsibility. Investigators believed they had identified the killer. Prosecutors believed they could prove it. The defense would have an opportunity to challenge that conclusion. And ultimately, a court would decide whether the evidence established guilt beyond reasonable doubt. The next chapter of the story would therefore move from laboratories, police offices, and crime scene reports into a courtroom in Freiburg, where every piece of evidence collected during the investigation would be examined under the scrutiny of law. By the time the case against Hussein Kavari reached the courtroom, the murder of Maria Leidenberger had already become one of the most closely followed criminal cases in Germany. For months, the public had watched investigators work through evidence, identify a suspect, and build a case. News reports had chronicled every major development. Political commentators had debated the broader implications. Citizens across the country had followed the investigation with a mixture of grief, anger, and curiosity. Yet despite the intense public attention, the courtroom was not a place for speculation. It was a place for evidence. The investigation had produced conclusions, but those conclusions now had to be tested within the legal system. The burden fell upon prosecutors to demonstrate that the evidence supported the charges beyond reasonable doubt. The defense would challenge those conclusions. Judges would evaluate the facts. And ultimately, the court would determine responsibility for one of the most shocking crimes Germany had witnessed during that decade. The proceedings took place in Freiburg and extended through 2017 into 2018. The length of the process reflected the seriousness of the allegations and the importance of examining every relevant piece of evidence. Murder cases are among the most consequential matters any court can hear. The stakes are immense for everyone involved. For the victim's family, the trial represents an attempt to obtain justice. For the accused, it determines freedom or imprisonment. For society, it serves as a mechanism through which facts are examined and accountability is established under the rule of law. In this case, public interest remained exceptionally high throughout the proceedings. Journalists closely monitored developments. Legal experts analyzed the evidence and legal arguments. The case continued to attract national attention not only because of the crime itself, but also because broader debates had emerged around immigration policy and information sharing between European countries. Yet inside the courtroom, those larger political discussions remained secondary. The central question before the judges was straightforward. Did the evidence prove that Hussein Kavari had sexually assaulted and murdered Maria Leidenberger? Prosecutors entered the proceedings with what they believed was a powerful case. Their argument rested upon several categories of evidence that investigators had assembled during the inquiry. Among the most important was the DNA evidence recovered from the crime scene. Throughout modern criminal justice systems, DNA has become one of the most influential forms of forensic proof because it establishes connections through biological material rather than memory or interpretation. In Maria's case, the forensic evidence formed a crucial component of the prosecution's argument. Prosecutors also relied upon the broader investigative findings developed during the months following the crime. These included crime scene analysis, surveillance review, and technical evidence examined by investigators. The strength of the case did not depend on a single fact standing alone. Instead, prosecutors argued that multiple categories of evidence pointed toward the same conclusion. This approach is common in serious criminal prosecutions. Individual pieces of evidence can sometimes be challenged or interpreted differently. However, when numerous independent findings align with one another, they can collectively create a persuasive picture of what occurred. Prosecutors presented a reconstruction of events that reflected the conclusions reached during the investigation. According to their case, Kavari encountered Maria while she was riding her bicycle home. He attacked her, sexually assaulted her, and then drowned her in order to conceal the crime. This final element, the motive of concealing another offense, became particularly significant because it related directly to the murder charge itself. The prosecution argued that the killing was not accidental and was not separate from the assault. Rather, it was part of an effort to prevent discovery of the earlier crime. As the proceedings continued, attention also focused on the defendant's response to the allegations. According to the case information, Cavari denied having intended to kill Maria. This distinction became one of the key issues examined during the trial. Criminal courts frequently confront situations in which defendants dispute not necessarily every event alleged by prosecutors, but the intent behind those events. Intent can have profound legal consequences because different mental states can lead to different criminal classifications and sentences. The judges therefore faced the task of evaluating not only what had happened, but also why it had happened. Determining intent requires careful analysis of evidence, actions, circumstances, and logical inferences drawn from the facts. Throughout the proceedings, the court reviewed the evidence collected during the investigation. Forensic findings were examined. Investigative conclusions were scrutinized. The reconstruction of events was considered in detail. The judicial process is designed precisely for this purpose. Evidence that may appear convincing in public discussion must still withstand formal examination. Inside a courtroom, claims must be supported. Conclusions must be justified. The legal system demands proof. As the trial progressed, prosecutors maintained that the evidence overwhelmingly supported their interpretation of events. The DNA evidence connected the defendant to the crime. The physical findings from the investigation supported the prosecution's reconstruction. The broader investigative record reinforced those conclusions. Together, prosecutors argued these elements established responsibility beyond reasonable doubt. Another issue addressed during the proceedings involved the defendant's age. Earlier public discussion had raised questions regarding whether Cavari was legally a juvenile or an adult at the time of the crime. This matter carried significant implications because German law treats juvenile offenders differently from adults in many circumstances. After examination of the available information, the court concluded that Cavari was an adult at the time of the offense. That determination ensured that the case proceeded under adult criminal law. While legal arguments unfolded inside the courtroom, the emotional dimension of the case remained impossible to ignore. At the center of every discussion about evidence, intent, and legal standards stood the reality of Maria's death. The victim was not an abstract concept. She was a 19-year-old medical student whose future had been abruptly ended. Family members, friends, fellow students, and members of the broader community continued to grapple with the consequences of that loss. Trials often serve two purposes simultaneously. On one level, there are legal proceedings concerned with evidence and law. On another level, they represent a public acknowledgement of harm. They formally recognize that a crime occurred and seek to identify the person responsible. In cases involving homicide, that recognition carries profound significance because the victim can no longer speak for themselves. The legal process becomes one of the few mechanisms through which society formally addresses the wrong that has been committed. Eventually, after reviewing the evidence and hearing the arguments presented during the proceedings, the court reached its conclusions. On March 22, 2018, judges delivered their verdict. The court found Hussein Cavari guilty of particularly serious rape and murder committed for the purpose of concealing another crime. The verdict represented the culmination of months of investigation and extensive judicial proceedings. It reflected the court's acceptance of the prosecution's central reconstruction of events and its determination that the evidence established guilt beyond reasonable doubt. For prosecutors, The verdict validated the investigative work that had begun at the Riverside crime scene months earlier. For law enforcement officers, forensic specialists, and analysts who had worked on the case, it marked the successful conclusion of a complex inquiry. For Maria's family and those who knew her, the verdict could never reverse what had happened, but it provided a legal answer to the question of responsibility. Sentencing followed the conviction. The court imposed life imprisonment. Under German law, a life sentence is the most severe punishment available for murder convictions. Yet the court went further. Judges also determined that the case involved what German law describes as a particular gravity of guilt. This finding carried substantial significance. In Germany, individuals sentenced to life imprisonment are often eligible for consideration after 15 years. However, a determination of particular gravity of guilt makes early release considerably less likely and can significantly extend the period of incarceration. By making that finding, the court signaled its assessment of the exceptional seriousness of the crime. The sentence reflected not only the fact that Maria had been killed, but also the circumstances surrounding the offense as established during the proceedings. Following the verdict, reactions spread quickly across Germany. The case had been watched closely for so long that the judgment itself became national news. Many observers viewed the outcome as a confirmation of the evidence gathered during the investigation. Others focused on the broader social and political questions that the case had raised. Yet regardless of differing perspectives on those larger debates, the legal proceedings had reached their conclusion. The court had identified the offender, determined criminal responsibility, and imposed sentence. The formal chapter of prosecution was over. But while the trial had delivered a verdict, it did not end the impact of the crime. Maria Leidenberger remained dead. Her family continued living with an irreversible loss. The community of Freiburg continued carrying the memory of what had happened. And Germany continued wrestling with the wider conversations that the case had sparked. The courtroom had answered the legal questions. The social and human consequences, however, would continue long after the judges left the bench and the verdict entered the official record. When a criminal trial ends, there is often a temptation to view the verdict as the conclusion of the story. Court proceedings provide structure. Investigations move toward arrests. Evidence is presented. Judges deliver decisions. Sentences are imposed. The legal process creates a clear narrative arc that begins with a crime and ends with a judgment. Yet for the people most deeply affected by a homicide, the end of a trial rarely feels like an ending at all. A verdict can establish responsibility. It can impose punishment. It can answer legal questions. But it cannot restore a life that has been taken. In the case of Maria Leidenberger, the court's decision on March 22, 2018, brought formal closure to the criminal proceedings. Hussein Kavari had been convicted of particularly serious rape and murder committed to conceal another crime. He had received a life sentence, and the court had determined that the offense involved a particular gravity of guilt. From a legal perspective, the case had reached its conclusion. From a human perspective, however, the consequences would continue indefinitely. For Maria's family, the reality remained unchanged. Their daughter was gone. The future they had imagined for her no longer existed. The milestones that families naturally anticipate, graduations, professional achievements, relationships, and countless ordinary moments, had been permanently erased. Homicide creates a unique kind of absence. Unlike many other forms of loss, it arrives suddenly and violently. It leaves behind not only grief, but also unanswered emotional questions. Families often spend years learning how to live with a reality they never expected to face. Although public attention eventually shifts to other stories, the private experience of loss continues. The same was true for Maria's friends and fellow students. When someone dies young, particularly within a close academic community, the impact extends far beyond immediate relatives. University environments are built upon shared experiences. Students attend classes together, prepare for examinations together, and navigate major life transitions together. The death of a peer can therefore feel deeply personal, even to those who knew the victim only. Casually, in Freiburg, Maria's murder left a lasting mark on a community that had viewed itself as safe and secure. The city itself also experienced a period of reflection. Freiburg had long been associated with education, sustainability, and a high quality of life. The murder challenged assumptions about safety in familiar spaces. The riverside route where Maria was attacked had been part of everyday life for students and residents. After the crime, many people found themselves looking at that landscape differently. Places often acquire emotional meanings through events that occur within them. A path that once represented routine travel can become associated with memory and loss. Communities affected by violent crime frequently struggle with this transformation. They must reconcile their previous understanding of a place with the reality of what happened there. Yet while grief remained a central part of the aftermath, Maria's story did not end solely in tragedy. One of the most significant developments following her death involved efforts to preserve and honor the values she had represented during her life. According to the available information, Maria's family and friends established memorial activities and scholarship initiatives dedicated to continuing the principles she had embraced. This response reflects a pattern seen in many communities affected by violence. Faced with irreversible loss, people often seek ways to transform memory into action. Memorials serve not only as reminders of what happened, but also as affirmations of what mattered, about the person who was lost. In Maria's case, those efforts focused on the qualities that had defined her life: compassion, service, and concern for others. Such initiatives cannot undo tragedy, but they can ensure that a victim is remembered for more than the circumstances of their death. That distinction is important. Public discussions of major criminal cases often become dominated by offenders. Media coverage focuses on investigations, arrests, and court proceedings. Over time, the perpetrator's actions can overshadow the victim's life. The memorial efforts established after Maria's death represented a conscious effort to resist that pattern. They shifted attention back toward the person she had been rather than the crime that had ended her life. Beyond the personal and local impact, the case also generated extensive national discussion. Few criminal cases become symbols within broader social debates. But Maria's murder did exactly that. Germany in 2016 and the years that followed was already engaged in intense conversations regarding immigration and refugee policy. The migration crisis of 2015 had brought large numbers of people into the country, creating political, logistical, and social challenges. Questions regarding integration, security, and governmental responsibility were already subjects of public debate before the murder occurred. The identity of the offender ensured that those discussions would become intertwined with the case. Many political figures and commentators argued that the crime exposed weaknesses in existing systems. Particular attention focused on the issue of information sharing between European countries. During the investigation and subsequent proceedings, it became known that Kavari had previously been convicted in Greece in connection with a robbery and assault involving a young woman. This information prompted questions about how criminal records were communicated across national borders and whether existing procedures were adequate. Critics argued that stronger coordination might improve public safety. The case therefore became part of a broader conversation about the responsibilities of governments and institutions within the European Union. At the same time, human rights organizations and many public voices urged caution. They warned against drawing conclusions about entire groups of people based on the actions of one individual. This perspective emphasized an important distinction between individual criminal responsibility and collective judgment. The vast majority of refugees and migrants had committed no crimes and should not be held accountable for the actions of a single offender. Advocates argued that justice required focusing on the person responsible rather than assigning blame to broader populations. These competing viewpoints ensured that the murder remained a subject of discussion long after the verdict was delivered. In many respects, the case became a reflection of larger tensions already present within German society. Questions about security, migration, integration, and public policy were debated through the lens of a tragedy that had deeply affected the nation. Yet regardless of political position, one fact remained unchanged. At the center of every discussion stood the death of a 19-year-old woman. It is easy for public debates to become abstract. Statistics replace stories. Policies replace people. Arguments become focused on systems rather than individuals. The danger of that process is that the victim can disappear from view. Maria Leidenberger's case serves as a reminder that behind every headline is a human life. Before her name appeared in newspapers, she was a student pursuing a medical education. Before she became the subject of political discussion, she was a volunteer helping refugees through Caritas. Before she became a homicide victim, she was a daughter, a friend, and a young woman building a future. Those facts matter because they restore perspective. True crime narratives often revolve around violence, but violence alone is never the full story. The more important story concerns the life interrupted by that violence. Maria's ambitions, values, and contributions did not vanish simply because her life ended. They remain part of her legacy. The scholarships and memorial initiatives created in her honor reflect that reality. They ensure that future generations encounter her story not solely as a crime victim, but as a person whose life carried meaning and purpose. Looking back, the murder of Maria Leidenberger remains one of Germany's most significant criminal cases of the 2010s. It shocked a university city. It prompted a major investigation. It led to a high-profile trial and a life sentence. It sparked national conversations that extended far beyond the courtroom. Years later, it continues to be remembered because of both the brutality of the crime and the wider questions it raised. Yet perhaps the most important lesson lies elsewhere. Cases like this remind us of the fragility of ordinary moments. On the evening of October 16th, 2016, Maria attended a student gathering, something countless young people do every day. She then began a bicycle ride home along a familiar route. There was nothing extraordinary about those actions. They were ordinary, routine, and seemingly safe. The tragedy of the case emerges partly from that ordinariness. It illustrates how quickly a normal evening can become something unimaginable. At the same time, the story also reveals something about resilience. Families, friends, and communities cannot erase the past, but they can choose how they remember it. They can preserve values. They can honor lives. They can insist that victims be remembered as complete human beings rather than merely names in criminal records. In the end, the story of Maria Leidenberger is not only a story about crime. It is a story about loss, justice, memory, and the enduring importance of human dignity. The legal system identified the person responsible and imposed punishment. History recorded the facts of the case. But beyond the investigation, beyond the trial, and beyond the public debate, remains the memory of a young woman whose life was devoted to learning, helping others, and building a future that she never had the chance to complete. That is the legacy that endures long after the courtroom has fallen silent. Years have passed since the events that unfolded in Freiburg in October 2016. Yet the case of Maria Leidenberger continues to occupy a unique place in Germany's collective memory. Some criminal cases fade from public consciousness shortly after a verdict is delivered. Others remain because they represent something larger than the legal proceedings themselves. The murder of Maria became one of those cases. It was remembered not only because of the violence involved, but because it touched multiple aspects of society at once: personal loss, public safety, criminal justice, migration policy, and the enduring question of how communities respond when tragedy strikes unexpectedly. Looking back at the case today, it is possible to see how dramatically a single night altered the course of many lives. Before October 2016, Maria was a young medical student at the beginning of a promising future. Her days were occupied by studies, friendships, volunteer work, and the ordinary experiences of university life. Like countless students across Europe, she was building a future one step at a time. There was no indication that her story would one day become known across an entire nation. Yet history is often shaped by moments that no one anticipates. A routine bicycle ride home became the dividing line between two realities: the life that Maria had been living and a national tragedy that followed her death. For investigators, the case became an example of the critical role played by modern forensic science. The inquiry demonstrated how biological evidence, surveillance analysis, technical data, and methodical police work can come together to solve a serious crime. The investigation was neither instantaneous nor simple. Detectives were required to collect evidence carefully, analyze information systematically, and construct a case capable of withstanding scrutiny in court. Their work eventually led to the identification and conviction of the offender. From a criminal justice perspective, the case reinforced the importance of thorough investigative procedures and international cooperation in modern law enforcement. Yet investigations and convictions represent only one dimension of a homicide case. The deeper impact is measured not by court documents, but by human consequences. Every murder creates a circle of loss extending outward from the victim. Family members experience grief. Friends struggle with absence. Communities attempt to make sense of events that often seem impossible to understand. In Maria's case, that circle extended far beyond Freiburg. Students throughout Germany identified with her story because she represented something familiar. She was not a celebrity or a public figure. She was a young person pursuing an education, helping others, and planning for the future. Her life reflected aspirations shared by countless students. Perhaps that is one reason why the case resonated so deeply. People could imagine themselves in her position. Parents could imagine their own children. Friends could imagine someone they cared about. The tragedy felt personal even to those who had never met her. The public debates that emerged after the murder revealed another reality about high-profile crimes. They often become symbols within larger societal conversations. The case prompted discussions regarding migration policy, information sharing among European countries, criminal background checks, and public safety. These conversations were often intense and emotionally charged. Different groups interpreted the significance of the case in different ways. Some focused on institutional failures. Others emphasized the importance of avoiding collective blame. The debates were complex, and many of them continue in various forms today. Yet regardless of where individuals stood on those issues, the facts of the case remained unchanged. A young woman lost her life. A criminal investigation identified the offender. A court examined the evidence and imposed a sentence. Those facts formed the foundation upon which all subsequent discussions rested. It is also worth reflecting on the way societies remember victims. True crime stories can unintentionally distort priorities. Public fascination often gravitates toward offenders. Their backgrounds are examined. Their actions are analyzed. Their names become widely known. Meanwhile, the victims themselves sometimes fade into the background, remembered primarily through the circumstances of their deaths. The legacy of Maria Leidenberger challenges that tendency. The memorial efforts established in her honor serve as reminders that her life cannot be reduced to a single act of violence. She was a student. She was a volunteer. She was someone who invested time helping others through her work with Caritas. Those aspects of her life deserve equal attention because they reveal who she was before the crime occurred. They remind us that every victim had a life independent of the tragedy that later defined public perceptions. In many ways, the most meaningful response to violence is not simply punishment, but remembrance. Punishment addresses responsibility. Remembrance preserves humanity. The legal system fulfilled its role when it investigated the crime, conducted a trial, and delivered a verdict. The responsibility of memory belongs to the people who continue telling the story. How a victim is remembered matters. Whether their values endure matters. Whether future generations understand them as a person rather than merely a case file matters. Maria's family and friends chose to honor her through activities and scholarships that reflected the principles she embraced. In doing so, they ensured that her legacy would extend beyond the courtroom and beyond the headlines. There's a tendency to search for lessons in every tragedy. Sometimes those lessons are clear. Sometimes they remain uncertain. The murder of Maria Leidenberger does not provide easy answers. It does not offer a simple explanation capable of satisfying every question raised by the case. Instead, it serves as a reminder of several difficult truths. It reminds us that violence can occur in places people consider safe. It reminds us that ordinary moments can change without warning. It reminds us of the importance of effective criminal investigations and functioning legal institutions. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us of the value of human life and the depth of loss created when that life is taken away. As this story comes to an end, it is worth returning to where it began, a quiet university city, a bicycle route beside a river, and a young woman making her way home after an evening with friends. Those details remain significant because they highlight the ordinary nature of a life that was interrupted. Maria was not seeking attention. She was not expecting danger. She was simply living her life. That ordinary reality makes the tragedy all the more profound. The court records, investigative files, and media reports will remain part of history. They document what happened and how the case was solved. But beyond those records exists something more enduring, the memory of a 19-year-old woman whose future was taken from her far too soon. Long after legal debates have ended and public attention has shifted elsewhere, that memory remains. And perhaps that is where the story should ultimately rest, not with the offender, not with the controversy, but with Maria Leidenberger herself, a young student, a volunteer, and a life that deserved far more time than it was given.